Do you sometimes wish you could change the world? If you're a farmer, you already are. In this special highlights episode of Food, Flowers, and Fun, we look at the transformative nature of agriculture and remember that you and the work you do matter more than you will ever know. If you're the woman who does it all, farm work, housework, bookwork, homework, getting up at the break of dawn, this is the podcast for you.
How do you multiply by fractions, Mom?
Get away from the cares of the day. Free stock, root stock, feed stock, seed stock. Chat with women around the world who raise food, flowers, and fun. With your host, Kay Castrataro. That's me. So welcome to today's episode of Food, Flowers, and Fun. I am your host, Kay Castrataro, and today I am just so excited to have Francesca Duval from the Alchemist Farm with us. She is a chicken midwife, basically, and just the coolest woman. So I'm not gonna say a whole lot more about you, Francesca, because I'm gonna let you tell your story. So tell us how you became a chicken midwife.
I love that that's how you introduce me as a chicken midwife. On the tail of all of my emails, the little subheader is the head chicken wrangler. That's how I normally refer to myself because that's what I seem to do around here mostly is wrangle chickens. But I also do hatch a lot of baby chicks. And so I do love being a chicken midwife. I'm the owner and founder of Alchemist Farm, which is a humane chicken hatchery in Northern California. And we offer many different breeds of beautiful chickens that lay fun, colored eggs that have all different personalities and beautiful feather types for different families to enjoy. We mostly ship our baby chicks to backyard families who want to have a little group of hens. And we believe that there is a chicken breed for everybody, just like there's a breed of cat or dog. And so we love getting to educate on the world of chickens and share what they are with the world because they have so much to offer us. They ask for so little and they give us so much in return. And I know from firsthand experience over this last decade of offering baby chicks to the world that they can have such a profound positive impact in people's lives. So it's an honor to make that my life work.
It wasn't originally going to be your life work, though. So tell us how you transitioned into this, because this was definitely not, career number one for you.
No, and I wonder if anybody knows their career number one from an early age. Maybe, It's always an interesting twist and turn path that leads us to where we're supposed to be. And I was originally studying psychology, graduated with a degree in psych, and thought that I would be some sort of a counselor, couples counselor, something like that. And when I was looking at graduate schools, I couldn't find the perfect fit. And so I was taking a gap year and really got into homesteading and met my husband and thought, well, in this homesteading journey, I think I actually want to do midwifery. I want to be able to help families in that way and help bring babies into the world. And so started studying that and attending births. And through that process, I realized, gosh, I'm attending births. I'm either going to be a midwife to many people, a wife to many people, or I can be a wife and a mother to my family. And I really had to choose. I didn't feel like I could sustainably do both. And so I chose my family. And that was a pretty hard choice because professionally, that's what I had geared myself up for so many years. And so I felt, I'm losing these years of my life. Am I wasting my time, kind of spinning my wheels here? And we had purchased our land at the same time that I was letting go of the midwifery dream. And we were starting to do a little homesteading here back before homesteading was cool. It was just wanting to be closer to the land and have a more of a simple life. And I went to order baby chicks because I knew I wanted to have chickens. I'd always had chickens in my life for 35 plus years. But when I went to order the baby chicks, I found out about the practices of most large scale hatcheries of euthanizing male chicks when they're hatched, the excess male chicks that no one wanted. And something about that one piece really stuck in my heart and made me pause. And it felt like almost like a lightning bolt was going through me of, I cannot support this. I need to do something different, but I don't know what.
Mm.
And it was this God-given moment. There, every now and again, there's these moments, and I don't know if you've experienced this or if the listener who's listening in right now has experienced this.
That's why we're here, because I had one of those moments.
Beautiful. Of like, pay attention. Something's different. Really focus because there's something here for you. And it was the chickens. And so I started to hatch for myself. And one thing led to another because I knew, okay, I can't support that. I got to do it myself. One thing led to another. And now we have the world's first humane hatchery where all of our birds are out on pasture. And I'm able to educate a lot on how the world can still interact with chickens in a way that treats them well, treats us well, treats the planet well. We're zero waste. We run entirely on solar power. We love educating people that these things are possible in their homes too. It doesn't have to be some scary thing where they're giving anything up. Really, they're gaining so much. And so it felt like God redirected my life and prepared me for this process because psychology is a perfect degree for my job of being a farmer and running a farm crew.
Shouldn't every farmer have a background in psychology just to stay sane? Not to mention dealing with customers and interpersonal relationships, but really that psychology does fit very well with agriculture.
It does. And midwifery and celebrating the
Yeah.
birth process and really honoring that life that's coming in. And so much of what I thought was a waste of time was actually all of these beautiful stepping stones. And so I learned to have mercy on myself in those years. And even now, when I find myself in moments of like, what is even happening? Why is this happening? This is not how I envision ththings. I have to step back and be like, I'm seeing it in the micro. I got to see it in the macro. God has a plan for me, and I just need to keep stepping forward with integrity.
Yes. Oh, I told so much about what you said is just like resonating with me right now. That idea of looking back and thinking, "Ugh, I wasted this time, or I wasted that opportunity, or had I done this differently, I'd be in a different place." And how that's not it. Like where you are now, you have everything that you need to be where you are now and to do the thing that you are called to do now. And without those wasted things, you wouldn't be able to do what you do as well. And I know that I found that in my life where I'm like, oh yeah, I taught middle school and high school English for 2 years. Oh, that was a waste of a, master's degree in education. And yet here I am educating people all the time about how to support themselves, working with farmers and using all of those skills in ways that I never expected to. But that's the miracle of what God does with us is that he takes us through this journey that we could never have planned for ourselves. And he does make something beautiful out of it. And I love that whole vision that you have for that. And I also was really struck by your talk about the sustainability and the interconnectedness of your experiences in the chickens and the environment and how that really transcends livestock, I think. Like it transcends the specifics of chickens and moves into where we all really can make a change for ourselves. What do you like how do you see that expanding beyond just the chicken world?
Oh, it can be anywhere. And I love um, offering that call to action, not a challenge, but just that inspiration for anybody, no matter what sector or business they're in. They can look around and see how could I make this better for the planet, for the people around me? How could I be in more integrity with everything that I'm doing every step along the way? And suddenly things will be revealed. If we ask for those kinds of answers to be given to us, they will be given.
So today I am so excited. We have Nancy Nalova with us from Cameroon, although she's currently in the States taking some classes. So that's nice because it's very hard for us to get in contact with each other. And she is a cassava grower, which I had I had not known anything about cassava. So Nancy, tell us about cassava. Tell us how you got farming. So tell me, because we're a lot of farmers on this podcast. So how did you get into the growing part of it? Have you ever grown like commercially before you did this? How did you get into that? And who else grows with you? Because you have quite a cool story about how many people are working with you.
Okay, actually, I have never grown cassava before. I had never grown that before. And we normally used to source raw materials, like we'll go to farms, we buy the cassava to transform. But as the number of people or the number of demand increased, the we started now sourcing for quality cassava because you can do all those transformations without quality, and we could not get that. We could not get the exact thing that we needed, so we had to source for lands and source for seedlings, and that is how we started growing our own cassava. And this
Mm.
is 2 years now that we have been growing, and I'll say it has been amazing. The journey has been great. Cassava is a very resistant crop, so it doesn't need too much labor, fertilizer, watering, and so on. When you plant it in a very good soil and you start the planting maybe with an organic manure, it's going to pick up, and that's it. After 6 months or 9 months, you harvest.
Nice, nice. And so you are actually a cooperative, correct? You have
Oh,
a
yes.
bunch of different people who all are co-owners together.
Mm-hmm.
So how many women, I think, right? Are they all women?
Okay, yeah, they are all women. They are all women. And presently, we are working with over 50 women, like 50
See.
rural women. And each of these women have their own farms. So it's not like we kind of, they are working with us and okay, they are permanent. No, they have their own farms. We just go to them, supervise them, train them on how to to plant the cassava, and we give them the seedlings, we give them the resources. And when they plant, we come and supervise everything. When it's ready, we come and buy. So this has permitted us to create a community, like a family in the community through this action, and also giving those women a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. Like, okay, they now feel important. Like, okay, if I plan this, if I don't plan, they won't have. So there's this feeling of being important while making money, because that's the goal, to make money. So that's
We
that's
all need it. We all
yeah.
need it.
So that's just the wonderful thing about the community. Working with over 50 women. I mean, it's not easy. We're talking about women here. You have to always be talking, always be shouting, always. But at the end, it's so wonderful seeing us coming together to celebrate, to plant, to harvest, to process. It's just amazing.
So do your women sometimes help each other on each other's farms, or do they work pretty much their own farm?
No, they work their own farms because for every hectare, because each of these women they own a hectare, and for every hectare we allocate 5 hired workers there.
Okay.
So they have people taking care of them, and yeah.
That's incredible. Absolutely
Mhm.
incredible.
And
So
we are the ones that pay those hired workers.
okay, so how does that, I'm curious as to how that works. So how do you figure out the profits for the farmers? Because I think I also heard you say that you're supplying the
The seedling.
seedlings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Mhm.
that's something that in the States, we don't do it that way. Like pretty
Okay.
much the farmer, at least none of the farmers I know operate that way unless well, I would say the only exception might be like CSAs. We have community supported agriculture. And in
Mhm.
that case, it's actually kind of similar to that because the people who are going to buy food from the farmer come to
Mhm.
the farm and they buy a share of the
Mhm.
produce. And so their money is what is used to buy the plants and the seeds and, all the equipment that they need throughout the year. And so it's like they're investing a little bit in the crop. But that's different than what you're doing. So
Oh,
you provide them with everything that they need except for the land, or did you also provide them with the land? Are they renting
yeah.
it or owning it?
For the land is their land.
Okay.
Actually, we had to source women that had land, but they didn't have capital to start.
Okay.
and they didn't even know what is that wheat. Yeah. A lot
Yeah.
of those lands were actually like in the forest, with a
Yes.
lot of trees. So we had to pay, they cut down those trees. And we're like, okay, you're gonna do this for us. We give you all the raw materials, we give you the labor. You just do your job, just supervise, just be you. And when you're ready, we just come and buy. And we buy, and that has helped us to actually get those raw materials. It permitted us first to get quality.
Yeah.
Since we are the ones supervising, we are sure of the quality of the raw material. Second, we are buying now at a cheaper rate.
Mm.
If for example, let me just say, like before we had a farm, we were actually buying 100 kg, 100 kilograms
Hmm.
of a bag of cassava. We were actually buying that for $100.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, it was very expensive.
Yeah.
But now, since we're into it and we're doing it ourselves, we are getting that for at least 35 to
Wow.
40. Yeah. So there's a huge difference.
And how are the farm women? How is that working for them? So, are they making are they making enough to live off of? Is it enough to just support, a little bit of their family, or does it meet like all of their needs? Are they able to put money aside and like upgrade things? Or I'm just curious. Farming is never terribly lucrative, so I'm
When, when I
I
when
always
I
worry
go back
about the
home,
farmer.
when I go back home, we're gonna do an interview with one of those women. So yeah,
Okay.
I think that's what we're gonna do because they I think they're actually gaining more than us. Hmm. Sometimes I'm like, these women, are we doing the right thing? But community work, because actually, what's their job? It's just to supervise the farm.
Yeah.
And they are the owners of the farm. So it's not like you renting a house and you're giving your landlord money every month. Like, okay. Yeah. So it's just like that. They're really earning a lot. They're earning.
And today we have a really exciting guest. We are branching out into the world of ocean farming, which I just think is so great that we're doing that. And I have Sarah Schumann with us. She is a commercial fisherman. She has lots of advocacy roles that she's doing. And Sarah, welcome to our show today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. So anybody who watches this show regularly knows that I kind of just jump in and start asking you to tell me who you are, how you got into doing what you're doing. I love that you are a fisherman. You fish in both Rhode Island and Alaska. So why don't you just start there and tell us how you got into being a commercial fisherman to begin with?
Sure. So unlike a lot of fishermen, I did not grow up in a fishing family or even in a fishing town. I grew up in Washington, D.C. My parents both worked for, at least for a time, for the federal government. So typical D.C. kid. And was really inspired by my fourth grade teacher. It was 1990 and it was the 20-year anniversary of Earth Day. It was like a big deal. Um, and so we learned from our weekly reader exercise in fourth grade about, we talked about the greenhouse effect, as they call it then, climate change, we call it now, and, air pollution and water pollution and loss of biodiversity and endangered species. And I just felt really called by that. It kept me up at night for a long time, thinking about what I could do, and just felt like that was my destiny, but didn't really know how to sort of operationalize that destiny within the structure of a life. Um, and so, um,
Yeah, because especially even as a young person, advocacy is not it's not like a career path that people are normally putting you on. It's like, are you going to be a teacher? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a lawyer? For us, are you going to be a farmer? But not so much are you going to advocate for others who can't advocate for themselves, including the environment. So,
say that growing
yeah.
up in DC, it actually is. It's a little
Oh,
different when you grow up in DC. It's very much a career path that you are surrounded by. I mean, a lot of my neighbors' parents were in that world. I mean, a lot of my kids' parents and neighbors were in that world. But I think for that reason, maybe it didn't appeal to me as much. That seemed to me like the sort of I don't know, the path of least resistance in a way. And I feel like other people are going to take that path. Good, solid, ethical, capable people are going to take that path of being a paid, inside the Beltway lobbyist for the environment. The world doesn't need one more of those. What the world needs more of is grassroots environmentalists, people who are living and working and living out there in the rest of the world, depending on the environment, interacting with the actual natural environment,
Yeah.
every day of their lives and standing up for it. So I was trying to figure out how I could be something like that. And when everything clicked for me was when I was on the coast of Chile. I had dropped out of college after 2 years. I was 20 years old. I was kicking around on the coast of Chile and just being a bohemian vagabond. But I met some small-scale commercial fishermen. They called themselves artisanal fishermen. They went to sea in like a 20-foot skiff, set some gill nets, caught their fish, brought it in. Typically, the female members of the family would help with marketing it, processing and marketing it. And then a lot of them would go to Congress and rally and advocate in their spare time. Some of them were focused on keeping industrial fleets offshore, so they weren't coming in inshore into the nearshore waters and affecting that habitat and the fisheries that these small-scale fishermen depended on.
Yeah.
Some of them were focused on industrial pollution from pulp mills and how to prevent that entering and contaminating the estuaries. And I was just like totally, totally enamored of what they were doing, totally inspired in a way that I can only describe as like lust um, for what they did and wanting to be just like
Like
them.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I entered
So
fishing.
you knew what you wanted to be when you grew up.
Exactly.
And
It
so
clicked.
how long were you down there with them in Chile?
I was there for about a year and a half and then decided to come back and didn't know how. I knew where I wanted to get, but I didn't know how to get there. So I decided to go back to college at the University of Rhode Island. It was at that time, may still be, the only university in the country that had a marine affairs program for undergraduates. So I figured, okay, maybe if I go take some classes, I'll figure out how to be a fisherman. Seemed logical to me based on what I knew then. And so that's what I did, and it actually worked because there were some other fishermen in my graduating class, and there was uh, a particular individual, Dan Orchard, who was getting a master's there at the same time in the Marine Affairs Department, and he ran um, a newspaper, like a very hyper local newspaper called the Fisherman's Call, which was just stories from what's going on in Point Judith, and he actually had a distribution. It was a paper newspaper. This was like barely, on the precipice of internet being a big thing.
Right.
So he was doing that. So of course he knew everybody. And so I talked to him and it's like, well, what I really want to do, like, don't tell anybody, but my dream is to be a commercial fisherman. Do you have any idea how I can do that? Um, and so he was like, yes, you should go talk to Andrea at the bait shack in Point Judith. And so I went to talk to Andrea, and Andrea knows everyone because she buys the lobster bait from the draggers and then she sells it to the lobstermen. So she knows everyone in the fleet.
Okay.
And so I went and saw her and I told her again, kind of sheepishly, like, I've never set foot on a fishing boat, but I know this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Um, and she connected me with Rich Cook on the Sandra Lynn, who at that time was deckhandless. Um, and so he hired me, and that's where I started out. And then since then, that was more than 20 years ago now. I've worked on a bunch of different boats in Point Judith, and then started going to Alaska um, in 2008 as well. Worked at a cannery for 9 years, actually, in a salmon cannery in Dillingham, Alaska,
So
and
tell
then
me
switched
how
to
you did
fishing
that,
there.
because I mean, I get it that it's all fish, but it seems to me that the sort of fish that you're going to be fishing for down on in Rhode Island is going to be much different than what you're doing up in Alaska. And you said you're salmon fishing
Mhm.
up in Alaska.
I found
No,
out I loved salmon. I didn't want to leave salmon.
love you. So the money just wasn't enough to drag you away from salmon. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I guess what happened, I really loved the salmon and I wanted to stick with that. So I worked at a cannery for 9 years and then started on salmon fishing boats. So I've done both sides of the salmon industry and I'm obsessed with salmon. I'm obsessed with that whole area of Bristol Bay, Alaska and the industry and the community and everything. but it also sort of became important to me to dedicate some time each year to the advocacy that I wanted to do. And so the winter time, which is when pollock season is, that's really the time that I've carved out to focus full time on the advocacy work that I do.
Okay. And so why don't we talk about that? Because I think one of the things that I really love about your story is how the advocacy and the actual work of, water farming were so connected to you and from the very beginning. Like you had that desire to be not just somebody who was advocating, but also somebody who was experiencing what it was like to be a producer. And so I think this is something really important for all aspects of agriculture because farmers, I think, often will look at advocacy as something that either somebody else does for them or something that they don't have the time or the energy or the expertise to do. And and I think that, there are places, as you said, for those professional advocates, but I think there's also a place for the people who are doing the work to advocate for themselves. So why don't you talk to me about the difference you see in that and how that plays out for you?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. Um, and I agree that I also feel with fishermen it's the same thing, that a lot of people don't want to be bothered. They want somebody else to do that for them. Some sort of paid advocate, ideally paid by somebody else, who just reads your mind and, gets you what you want. But so much of the time there's sort of this bifurcation, right, between like scientists and fishermen, or advocates and fishermen, or advocates and farmers with different skill sets, different sort of occupational communities. They wind up having different values and they wind up having this sort of siloed thing. And really that is all sort of to the detriment of like accountability, I think, that if you really truly want to have agency, you have to do some things yourself and you have to sort of merge those roles of being the farmer or being the fisherman and the advocate. I guess advocacy may not be the best word. I use sort of a community organizing model because community organizing is, at its in its purest sense about being, organizing your peers. So being a member of the community that you're seeking to empower as opposed to separate from it.
And so I'm wondering how you manage to stay kind of grounded and how you take care of yourself in an occupation that is very physical. It's got to be emotionally stressful, requires a lot of communication, and you're dealing with a gender who definitely has its own set of views of women, excuse me, in certain industries. So, how do you take care of yourself in that context? What do you do for yourself?
Hmm. I could probably do better at that. I'm trying to spend more time thinking about work-life balance. Um, I am lucky though. I mean, I sort of I achieve balance through the two aspects of my work. Like I find the advocacy to be at times very stress-inducing and very heartbreaking, um,
Mm.
especially right now. Um, the
Yeah,
fishing
talk
is
to me
where I
about
sort of
that.
alleviate that because being a deckhand, especially, I don't have any responsibility. I just get to do what I'm told. I have the great privilege of working for two captains, one in Alaska and one on Rhode Island, who are dear friends. Um, and that is my happy place, right? On the boat. That is where I go to relax. I work hard, I sweat, I get exhausted, I sleep hard. Um, but that sort of recharges me to then come back to my computer and get online and read about what's going on in the world and figure out how I can try to make it better.
And our guest today is amazing. Her name is Azure Sigler, and she is here in Rhode Island. So Azure, welcome. Oh, and she is the owner of Rhody Kelp, correct? That is your business name. And she's going to tell us all about what it is to farm kelp, which I just think is fascinating because I love the whole idea of seaweedy type stuff. So Azure, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Oh, so glad to
Exciting
have you.
day.
So, we usually just get in and I start with having you tell us about yourself, where you're from, how you got into kelp. Like, what a great story you have. So, share that with us.
Thank you. Yes, my company is Rhody Wild Sea Gardens. Rhody Kelp is always the most logical way of remembering it, which is through my Instagram. But I started, really grew up in the ocean arena. I grew up in Southern California, always loved the sea. Took scuba diving with my dad, grew up surfing down in La Jolla. So always loved the ocean. And really, saw the ocean as needing the most help in terms of fisheries. So took my college path through the University of Santa Cruz, doing, marine biology, but then really focused on fisheries. There was we have a tendency to over extract, us crazy humans. So there were some thoughts and issues around fisheries. So I got into the world of ocean career work and studied fisheries and became a fisherman. So I fished in Alaska and American Samoa, and eventually led me to Cape Cod, where I work with some grassroots fishing organizations. So fishing was sort of my deep dive, no pun intended, into the ocean world and ocean work, and then did a lot of science and outreach and work for the Science Center in Woods Hole, for NOAA Fisheries, and sort of dabbled. But all of that, I feel, has culminated into lived experiences, which have brought me into aquaculture. And I started my own farm in 2020. I call it a career chiropractic, where I sort of adjusted where I felt I could be most of use in terms of where the ocean could use a little love and where I wanted to put my energy, and decided to start my own kelp farm in 2020.
Yeah, and I feel like those pandemic years were really pivotal for a lot of us. I feel like you are not the first farmer that I've had on here who kind of found a new calling in that 2019, 2020
Mm.
area, because things got really, really ugly. And I find it interesting that you kind of got back into taking care of the ocean through aquaculture at that time, because one of the things that really struck me during the pandemic was all the reports coming out about how much cleaner air was in different places, and how rivers that had been like completely disgusting were just naturally restoring themselves simply because we weren't doing what we always did. And I grew up in a farm family that, ironically, you can be a farmer and not be like an environmentalist. Like, we rely on the farm and the land and nature so much. And yet there is kind of sometimes this disconnect that, like, being an environmentalist means that you don't want to use the land. You just want to, have it as free, forests or whatever, which doesn't have to be the case at all. And so I find it interesting to have people who go back into some kind of farming, because of their desire to take care of nature.
Mm.
So talk about how you fell in love with kelp, because you did all kinds of, like, I've got all kinds of different fish here. I mean, you were doing king crab and tuna. You worked for Starkist, right? So like you were doing some big tuna fishing. That's not like that's not that's not tuna fishing for the neighborhood. Like, that's pretty impressive. So how'd you get into kelp?
Well, I think, coming back to your great perspective on the pandemic, I think we all sort of found ourselves as our authentic selves. A sort of crisis brings out authenticity, I think, too,
Mm,
and whether that's a raw, good or bad. And so I think, for me, the as a woman, always been career centered and worked my whole life, and come from that type of family as well. I felt as though that sort of calling as a mom. I have two kiddos, a 15-year-old and 8-year-old, and watching them grow, and there was that strength and resolve as that nurturer, and then knowing, oh, my role as a woman nurturer is kind of shifting because my kids are growing up. So how else can I nurture? And so I feel like for me in 2020, going into kelp farming, it was a very natural calling to at least try, and knowing there was a lot of unanswered market questions, and a lot of other people in Rhode Island have done kelp and have done it really well, are still doing it really well. So it's by no means a new or novel idea, but I think there was like a lull where in 2020, folks had tried it, grew it well, and there was not a lot of market opportunities, and that was really appealing. Kelp is just sort of the notoriety of kelp is that it provides all these ecosystem services. So it's a macroalgae, it grows in the ocean, it's making oxygen. So it's not a plant, it's an algae, but it does a lot of the same features. It absorbs excess nitrogen, phosphorus, all the junk that runs off of our roads after a rainstorm. It's absorbing that and cleaning our water. It's
So it's
capturing
another
carbon.
filter feeder. So it's actually a lot like oysters, can be a filterer.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
natural, plants as gardeners, obviously your farming community knows, it needs, there's certain nitrogen and phosphorus that is needed. And so the algae thrives off of that as a macroalgae, but it's also taking it up so that there's not excess
Excess.
in the water to make these algal blooms and other harmful effects. So it's really, really good for the environment. It's a local, it's a native species that's found in Rhode Island, so it's not something that's introduced. So there's just a lot of like pluses, a lot of wins. So that felt like a natural place to pursue that nurturing instinct. Like maybe I can do this, get back on the water, nurture in a way, and also kind of solve this, chip away at solving this, challenge that's stymieing the growth of this really amazing potential industry. So that's sort
Yeah,
of
so
where I
you
came at it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I tend to jump in sometimes. An idea comes in, I'm like, "Ooh." So you were saying that the market was kind of the issue, that there had not been a great market for it, which is why, the kelp industry had kind of petered off a little bit. So how did you address that? What did you do with that?
I think I
Because
addressed that.
you've got some kelp sitting around there somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah, this
Seeing as
is
we're
our
talking about marketing.
greenhouse where we just dry it. It's just passive drying. They do heat the greenhouses. I don't really have any control over that. I would turn off the heat if I could, certain times of the year, but I just hang it up, it dries, it turns out to look like this. It can be crunched up and used for soil amendment, for animals. A lot of livestock really love and thrive eating kelp. It's good for them. So that's what it looks like. I know, I totally forgot your question. Oh, the market. So I
Give it away.
chose to just acknowledge it and then ignore it, by realizing, okay, I can't solve that I can't even attempt to solve it unless I first learn what kelp farming is all about and grow it
Yeah.
myself and walk that walk. So I basically tackled it by saying, we'll figure that out as we go. Still haven't figured it out, but we're getting there. And knowing also that one of the appealing things with aquaculture in general in Rhode Island, which is 95+% oysters. So in Rhode Island we have about almost 90 farms, some farms are owned by multiple people. So let's say 45 farmers, very small to medium scale businesses, very family oriented.
And just to clarify, these are aquaculture farms that you're talking about.
Yep,
Yep.
and
So I'm
aquaculture is,
just for those who do not know Rhode Island
thank you,
agriculture, to know that we do
thank
have
you.
more than just 45 farms, but we're talking 45 farmers
Ocean
just
farmers.
doing like ocean
Yep.
farming. Right.
Yep. Thank you. Yes. So
No
we
problem. No
very,
problem.
very focused on oysters, which has been really a healthy industry and kind of has its blips and ups and downs, but sort of has always trended to be very positive living, not easy by any stretch, or reliable, but definitely, somewhat stable. And so the kelp element was just a really fascinating aspect, knowing I could sort of engage with that community. I think the land-based farmers I've met are really, there's that perfect blend of like, okay, I got my secret sauce and my thing going. I'm not going to tell you everything, but I'm here to help you if you need it with that. So they walk a very nice collaborative line without sacrificing their own enterprise or their own, IP so I think that's a really cool part of aquaculture in Rhode Island.
Yes.
And so knowing I could sort of rely on that community to try to chip away at it, especially the places where there would be shared benefit for multiple businesses. Other folks really wanted to solve this too, who are permitted to grow kelp. So that was my thought.
And today, our guest is Tolawani Precious Ogunbiyi, and I'm sure that I did it okay. I did it okay.
Yeah.
She is joining us from Nigeria. Precious is the founder of Agridemi, which is a platform to help people learn how to grow food.
There are lots of challenges, not even talking about the policy challenges. There are so many policy challenges. Some policies do not favor, farmers, and that's because like I said in the beginning, it's a volume game. So if you are not playing big, it's like you're automatically going to lose one way or the other. So only the big players, the billionaires that are into agriculture really can say that, oh, I'm making big money in agriculture. But that shouldn't be it. We should actually, and that's one thing that would encourage more people to come into the agricultural system when they see that there is profits here. But because, this system has so discouraged people to think that there will always be a loss, it's really it's a dwindling sort of system. We are not seeing it thrive as it should. In fact, someone I've worked with it's funny how he's into the agricultural system, but he would advise anyone that wants to go into agriculture, do not do it except you're sure you know what you want to get yourself into, because it can be depressing. It can be a lot. Of course, there are good parts to it. I mean, if you do it well, you make the money, but it can be a lot.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, I wish that were something that didn't happen everywhere, but I know that in the United States, there are a lot of people who are torn between, they love farming, and so in one sense, they want their kids to stay in the game. And yet, on the other hand, they want their kids to have an easier life and to make more money. And so they do encourage them not to stay in farming, which I think is very reasonable. And I think it's also disappointing, because I think maybe it's time that we start readjusting our understanding of agriculture and making it so that the farmers themselves can be fulfilled on multiple levels. Like, it's not okay for us to be driving farmers out of business when they really are the ones who, I always use this phrase, feeding our bodies and souls. They are, they're creating beauty, and they're creating food, and they're taking care of us in ways that we need to find a better way to support them. And it sounds like you're trying to do that through Agridemi. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
That's right.
tell us about Agridemi and what that is all about.
Okay, so I love talking about Agridemi because I just love what we do. Agridemi is yeah, you can tell I love what I do, right? Agridemi is a platform that, by the way, I never saw it coming. I was just in my room one day, and the thoughts, just crossed my mind that agriculture is fun. It can be fun. We've made it so rigid, we've made it so structured, we've made it so deep that people can really relate to it. So I decided that, what, I'm going to start Agridemi. And what we're going to do in Agridemi is that we're going to make agriculture fun. We're going to make it relatable. We're going to make it powerful. We're going to teach people how to grow their own food with the resources they have, with the space they have, and show them that it is actually possible, that you're part of the solution if you can grow your own food. When we grow our own food, we are, reducing our over-reliance on the corporate food system, which is a big solution a lot of people overlook. So that's what Agridemi does in short.
So explain how that happens, because I love that idea. And one of the things, I'm a multi-generational farm kid, so like we've had 5 generations of farmers, and that has been like basically our whole living is farming. And so what I've seen is that there is kind of a stigma against farmers who are either part-time farmers or, like you were saying, subsistence farmers. In the States, we call them homesteaders, but people who are growing their own food and might have a little bit to sell at at the end of the road to their neighbors or something like that, but nothing really huge. And I love what you're talking about with Agridemi, because I feel like it's really time that we start changing that narrative. Because I think it doesn't do service to what agriculture really is and who farmers really are. Like, I think farmers are more than just, the big industrial farmers. Like, there is a place for the small family farm, and it might look different than what we expect. So talk to me about how that works in Agridemi. Like, how are you creating these small farmers? Like, I'm going to call them small farmers, startup farmers.
Yeah, I actually love what you said, because it's very valid, in the sense that I have a very personal story that even just came up. I didn't think about it in that way But when you mentioned that, I just, actually was able to put together that this is what happened. So I was trying to form a corporation with an agricultural company. They're an agri-tech company. Actually, they reached out to me to form a sort of partnership or corporation. But by the time I started telling them about, more details about what Agridemi does and the fact that I grew small farmers, I help educate small farmers. I myself, I do a little bit of gardening, I grow food for myself, for my family. They ruled me out as, oh, you don't really have the connection we're looking for. You don't really have, so they're looking for the big farmers. They literally said it that since I do not have, that type of, capacity as, an industrial farmer, I might not be able to help them. But I knew I was well able in my capacity to help them establish their farm, because that was the goal, help them establish their ag tech business here in Nigeria. But they ruled me out. And I feel like it's a very, very valid complaint that just because you're a homesteader, just because you're a gardener, just because, and funny thing is that that is the solution. We think until you grow in millions or in billions of tons of food, then you're, solving a problem. But what we are doing in Agridemi is that we're empowering people in different parts of the world, not just Nigeria, not just Africa, different parts of the world, to be able to see that it is very relatable to grow your own food. You do not have to depend on the big industrial farms. And how we are doing it, which is the question you asked, how we are doing it is that we are mixing creativity with agriculture. So rather than, and I'll tell you how Agridemi came to be. I was in class one day. My teacher was teaching me. I studied agriculture, like I mentioned. So my teacher was teaching us something about, the farm. I can't remember the particular topic, but I remember I went back home that day, and as I was preparing for my exam, I decided to watch a YouTube video. As I was watching the YouTube video, it was so boring, it was so lifeless. Something clicked in me that, wait, it doesn't have to be this way. So I took up my notes and I started to, jot. I started to connect the lines, because that's how I read. I try to form an image in my mind and connect it, make everything like a unified concept. And I was like, this is really interesting. Why don't I make sure the world that agriculture can be interesting? And from there on, I started, finding content, developing content that will show the what word will I use? How interesting agriculture is. That it's not just pen and paper, which is very weird, because agriculture is one of the most practical things you could do. Farming, right? You are touching the soil, but we've made it so bland, so uninteresting. And that was how agriculture came to be, by mixing creativity with farming.
I love that. I love that. So you talk about it as a platform. So is it mostly an online, or if you're doing a lot of hands-on work with farmers as well? Because you were talking about some farmers that you've worked with more closely. So I'm curious as to how people are getting the information, how you're helping to make it interesting to people who maybe didn't consider agriculture to be a job before.
Okay, so thank you for that question. Agridemi is currently online. Like, we're currently maximizing our online channels, but we sometimes go into schools. This is not something we've recorded. The last time we went into a school system to try to teach students, we realized that there is a potential here. So we plan on making that large scale really soon, which is something I'm excited for, right? We do not work very one on hand or very closely with farmers yet. It's definitely in the works. But by the way, Agridemi started last year, and to see the progress we've made so far is so I'm mind blown by it. And I just love that there's potential, because when I started this, I was like, agriculture, who would buy into this idea? I mean, why would anyone be interested in agriculture? Now tell me why I started posting. I mean, we started posting on social media only to see that a lot of people were actually interested. And you see people will post on our social media pages, and you'll see people, comments like, oh my God, this is really insightful. Wow, I learned something, so I could do this. So, that's easy, it's that straightforward. I mean, all I need is a seed. And now that you've given me the instructions, I know exactly what to do. I have soil in my backyard. So why am I wasting my time? Right. So basically that's what we've been doing.
But as we're coming to the end, I always ask my guests if they have like one word that they would give to farmers. Like if there were one thing that they felt every farmer should know, what would that be? So what would you tell farmers if you had the opportunity to give them that one piece of key advice?
This fact that you matter. And I know that we say it a lot that, oh, you matter, you matter. But I really do mean it when I say you matter. The work you're doing, especially if you're a farmer that is not just focused about gaining. So you don't just use chemicals and synthetic fertilizers to grow your food just because you want the money, but you're intentional about building growing healthy food that people can eat and have a better well-being. You actually matter. What you're doing matters. And if you're someone like me, who, what you're doing is advocating, what you're doing is creating knowledge, what you're doing is finding creative ways to push out agriculture, you matter. And it will count in the future. You might not be able to see it in the little bits and pieces here and there, but it counts and you matter.
But I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I will see all of you out there next time on Food, Flowers, and Fun. Have a great day.
Bye.
How do you multiply by fractions, Mom?
Farmers calling, our show is all done. Goodbye, farewell, so long, adieu. See you next week, same time, same place for Food, Flowers, and Fun. Go in peace. Visit us at www.penlightfarmers.com.